In 1988, Data East captured the gritty essence of one of the decade's greatest sci-fi action films and brought it straight to the arcade. Complete with heavy weaponry and iconic digitized voice samples, they delivered a run-and-gun hit that proved Hollywood blockbusters could successfully make the jump to the coin-op world.
Thank you for your cooperation.
What's up, citizens, and welcome back to another episode of Arcade Economy, the series where we take a look at old arcade classics to determine just how much they cost to beat at the time of their release, and how fair they were to our wallets. In our last episode, we joined the rebels to take down the Galactic Empire in Star Wars Trilogy Arcade. Today, we're heading to the crime-ridden streets of Old Detroit to enforce the law in Data East's 1988 hit RoboCop. Was this game programmed to protect your allowance, or was it just another greedy OCP directive designed to take your quarters? As always, we're gonna find out.
Serve the public trust, protect the innocent, uphold the law. RoboCop.
Flashback to 1987. Following the theatrical success of the film RoboCop, it wasn't long before RoboCop mania had completely swept the globe, making it one of the most marketable film IPs for merchandise. Naturally, one would expect the video game industry to be eager to cash in. Now back then, it was standard practice for arcade developers to put a game into production and then develop the coin-op machine and then sub-license the IP out to make home console and computer ports. But RoboCop did the exact opposite. British video game publisher Ocean Software took the chance on the franchise before the movie's release, securing the video game rights from Orion Pictures while the movie was still in script stage. Ocean Software sub-licensed the arcade development rights to the Japanese developer Data East. From there, Data East and Ocean worked in tandem. Data East got to work on building the coin-op version, heavily pulling mechanics from their recent hit, Bad Dudes vs. Dragon Ninja. They mashed up traditional beat-em-up brawling with run-and-gun shooting, creating a hybrid style that perfectly fit Murphy's slow movements and massive firepower. While Data East was building the arcade game, Ocean Software was given early unfinished build of the levels so they could simultaneously translate that experience to home computers like the Commodore 64 or the ZX Spectrum. When the arcade cabinet finally dropped in late 1988, it was a massive worldwide success, becoming the highest-grossing arcade game of 1988 in Hong Kong and shooting straight to the top of the arcade charts in Japan. It was one of the first major Western IPs that proved that a well-executed Hollywood license could dominate the arcade floor, setting a major precedent and shift in the industry moving into the 90s. When it comes to ports, RoboCop would go on to become one of the most successful games for the home computer market, especially in the UK. In 1988 and 1989, RoboCop blasted its way onto basically every major computer of the era, including the Commodore 64, Amiga, Atari ST, Amstrad CPC, MS-DOS, and Apple II. But it was the ZX Spectrum version that truly solidified this game's legacy, becoming one of the biggest selling games on that platform. RoboCop eventually made its way to traditional home consoles as well, with Data East porting it to the NES in 1989 and Ocean delivering a solid Game Boy version in 1990. But when you look back at the sheer dominance of this title, it was the home computer crowd that really helped RoboCop make its presence known in the video game world. An arcade and home version sequel would follow in the early 90s. RoboCop 2 followed the narrative of the movie's sequel with the same name, and this time featured two-player action. However, it wasn't as big of a hit as the original. A few years later, a movie tie-in to RoboCop 3 would skip the arcades and instead release directly to home consoles and computers. In 1993, RoboCop vs. the Terminator released on the Super NES and Sega Genesis Mega Drive, based on the comic book miniseries of the same name. Despite releasing at the same time, each version is a fundamentally different game. It would be a decade before RoboCop made his return to the video game market with 2003's RoboCop for Xbox, PS2, and GameCube. It's a game that received very poor reviews and could probably be skipped. Flash forward another 20 years, and in 2023, RoboCop Rogue City released to generally favorable reviews, with critics praising it as one of the most faithful adaptations of the film to date.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
The storyline of the arcade game stays faithful to Paul Verhoeven's 1987 cinematic masterpiece. Upon starting the game, cinematic cutscenes will catch you up on the story if you're able to read at the speed of light. In the near future, the city of Old Detroit has become completely overrun by crime. Desperate for a solution, the city privatizes its police force, handing control over to the mega-corporation Omni Consumer Products, or OCP. After honest cop Alex Murphy is brutally gunned down in the line of duty, OCP sees the perfect opportunity to test out their latest law enforcement program. They take what's left of Murphy and rebuild him into a heavily armored one-man army known as RoboCop. Guided by 3 prime directives:
serve the public trust, protect the innocent, uphold the law.
You are dropped right into the middle of the crime-infested streets of Old Detroit. Your mission is to punch and shoot your way through the hordes of thugs and eventually confront the corrupt OCP executive Dick Jones. Oh, and you'll have to go toe-to-toe with several of OCP's flawed enforcement mechs, the Ed 209. RoboCop is a hybrid traditional side-scrolling beat-em-up and a run-and-gun shooter, although it definitely leans more into the run-and-gun shooter aspect. The game uses a standard 8-way joystick with 2 buttons, shoot and jump. You move with slow, heavy steps, and your jumping is pretty stiff, which honestly feels completely authentic to the character. The first few enemies you face will have to be taken out by hand until you reach the first enemy with a gun. At this point, Murphy whips out his trusty Auto 9 pistol with unlimited ammo. You'll use this for the remainder of the game to blast enemies from a distance. If an enemy gets too close, the game automatically switches your attack to a punch to clear them out. You can aim straight up or diagonally to blast away pesky thugs shooting at you from windows and upper levels, and ducking is crucial to avoiding enemy fire. Occasionally, you can punch open crates to find jars of baby food to restore your health, a nice little nod to the movie there. You can also get a number of weapon upgrades, which include the 3-way shot, a dual shot that can shoot through walls that I've been instinctively calling the shotgun, and the Cobra Assault Cannon, which can one-shot most enemies and shred through bosses. Each weapon pickup has a limited amount of ammo, so make your shots count because you'll need all the firepower you can get. Now, this game does feature one punishing mechanic. RoboCop has no invulnerability frames. At least, not when taking damage. In most games, when you get hit or knocked down, your player will stop taking damage for a couple seconds, giving you a chance to kind of escape or reposition yourself. In RoboCop, however, that doesn't happen. If you get caught in a stream of bullets or boxed in by enemies, your health bar will melt in a matter of seconds. It's not really noticeable at first, but became pretty frustrating later in the game when the number of enemies on screen is crazy high. However, there are invulnerability frames when you die and insert another coin for at least a couple of seconds. I also noticed where this game had a few moments of slowdown where there was just too much going on screen for the system to process it. Because there are too many assets on screen, you are unable to fire your weapon, because the machine just can't render more assets being created. So when this does happen, you may experience a part of the game where you're just unable to attack. It's something that did happen with games of these times as they're trying to kind of push the arcade boards and they just can't handle it. Not really a good look here. The game takes you through 7 distinct stages, occasionally broken up by a first-person target practice bonus round at the police firing range to help restore your health. Stage 1 drops you right into the middle of a riot in downtown Detroit, culminating in an iconic first encounter with the Ed 209. Stage 2 takes you to the slums of Old Town, where the boss is a heavily fortified van that dumps a bunch of thugs and chainsaw-wielding maniacs onto the screen.
You are under arrest.
Stage 3 has you navigating a junkyard to take on mechanical cranes. If you're able to hold onto the Cobra Assault Cannon for this boss, it does a ton of extra damage. Stage 4 sends you into a narcotics factory where you have to face off against a wrecking ball. Stage 5 ramps up the difficulty, throwing jetpack troops at you before ending with a fight against an upgraded green Ed 209. Stage 6 brings you directly to the steps of OCP headquarters, where you are greeted by not 1, but 2 dark gray Ed 209s. And then finally, Stage 7 takes you up to the OCP boardroom for yet another fight against, you guessed it, an Ed 209, and then a tense final showdown against Dick Jones, who is using a human shield.
Thank you for your cooperation.
And now it's time to find out just how much I spent to beat RoboCop. Now for these games, I play them on emulator on their default settings, and I set up a counter to increase every time I hit the insert coin button. When it was all said and done, I spent a total of $7 or 28 credits to beat RoboCop. Spending $7 in 1988 would feel like spending $19.35 today. And it took me about 35 minutes to beat the game, bringing my cost per minute to 20 cents. For the bosses, I spent 25 cents or 1 credit on the first Ed 209, 25 cents or 1 credit on the van, no continues on the crane, 50 cents or 2 credits on the wrecking ball, 50 cents or 2 credits on the green Ed 209, 50 cents or 2 credits on the 2 Ed 209s, and 75 cents or 3 credits on the last Ed 209/Dick Jones, bringing my boss total to $2.75. And now it's time to bust out the predatory game scale to determine just how predatory RoboCop was at stealing your money. RoboCop doesn't steal, he's a cop. Now I'm classifying this as a run and gun because this game is really only a beat 'em up for a few seconds and then it just goes full run and gun for the remainder of the time that you play. And this game is pretty high in cost when comparing it to other games of the era, but it's still nowhere near as high as some of the run and guns that I ranked at the top of the scale. But 20 cents per minute on 25-cent credits is almost double the average of the games that we've seen on this series when we talk about cost per minute. Now, does the game cheat? Not in like an input reading sense. I do think that this game does have unavoidable damage, mostly because of how many enemies can be on screen at once and how slow moving your character is. Also, the slowdown in the game doesn't help either. There isn't really much of a learning curve. I did find the controls to be a little sluggish and at times unresponsive, but overall they were intuitive. There was a number of times where I was trying to fire straight up and instead would just fire diagonally, and it did frustrate me a little bit. The lack of invulnerability frames was something that definitely stood out to me, and there were times where I felt like I died in just a matter of seconds, even after I just came back from continuing. And there were a few bosses that I just couldn't really figure out how to avoid damage on. The wrecking ball being one of them. I'm sure if I played for a little bit longer, I might have been able to crack it, but I'm also just not completely convinced that you can totally avoid damage here. The game does give you a decent amount of health and power-up pickups, so I will give it that. Also, the continues are a normal progression. It doesn't start you from the beginning like Contra or start you at the beginning of a boss level like in Narc. You can just progress your way through as long as you have the bankroll. And then fun factor, yes, this game was fun. There are a bunch of other arcade games I probably would rather play over it, but when you think about the time that it came out, I can see why this game was such a draw. So with all of that factored in, I do think RoboCop was unfair, but it was nowhere near the unfairness of some of the other run and guns that I've covered. I'm going to give RoboCop an 8 out of 10 on the predatory game scale.
Your move, creep.
Do you agree or disagree with my ratings? Sound off in the comments below and I will do my best to reply. Now, can you play RoboCop Arcade today? Unfortunately, no, not unless you emulate it or find it in the wild. I don't foresee this game coming out anytime soon either, unless we get it on some weird Data East collection or just some 80s arcade game collection. Next time on Arcade Economy, we're sticking with the Cyberpunk robot theme and looking at a more modern arcade game with Terminator Salvation. Will this game do justice for our T2 episode? Tune in next time to find out. Hey guys, thanks for watching. This game was a lot of fun to do, and while I've been covering these movies based on games, I've been going back and watching these movies as well. So I get to watch RoboCop, and it's been a while since I've seen it, but man, what a great movie that still is. Still holds up. It's a little campy and corny at times, but I still enjoyed it. It's great. The 80s was like a peak time for practical effects, and I really just love movies of that generation. Anyway, huge shout out to our Patreon and YouTube member producers. You guys know who you are: Jake Weed, Tanner Trezza, Pezmage, John Forhan, Smash Jackson, Gregory Hines. Big thank you guys for supporting the show. You guys are the best. And if you would like to support the channel, you can become a YouTube member or a patron on Patreon. The VIP viewer level and above will get all of my videos early and ad-free, plus a director's cut of Arcade Economy with more footage around the game's history. And you'll also get an extra video each month. This month, that video is going to be Cyberpunk games that made a big impact on the industry. I expect to finish that somewhere within the next couple of weeks of the release of this video. Anyway, that'll do it for me. Thank you guys for hanging out. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't. It really does help me, and hopefully you guys will see me on my next video. Thanks for watching.
Drop it!